So this is a quick explanation about positive and negative for your positive and negative drawing. Positive and negative shapes are the different spaces that occupy your drawing. What we consider the figure or the object or the person or the primary character of the drawing would be considered the positive space, at least in terms of how you treat it. The negative space would be the ground that sits behind the figure. What's very effective for students to start understanding is that in a 2D planar space, it is no longer important what is figure and what is ground. Positive and negative is an interesting and more fun way to deal with your space if you can alter the emphasis from one to the other or utilize one to indicate the other. So here's what I mean. So although the silhouette of the scissors would be considered the figure, in this particular diagram the artist has separated the way it's treated as one half as the positive with a white background and a dark foreground, and then the other half as a negative, where the figure is left blank and all of the information is placed around in the negative space. Put together, they still read as scissors, but that inversion of the value is far more interesting, and it allows for embedding a lot of information into your drawings and paintings and designs. And it also allows you to see differently. So we don't look at the figure when we do positive negative drawings, we look at the spaces between. So the face vase example is a very common example for learning positive and negative. And the reason the face vase illusion works is because the artist has designed equivocal space into the design. The white is occupying equal space as the black. Therefore, your mind has a difficult time discerning what is figure and what is ground. So if you look at this, you likely will flip between seeing the face and seeing the face. It's actually pretty hard to see both, although I think you can. Typically, the average person tries to pull one of the figures forward and push the other back. And this is actually interesting. It engages your viewer. It's created two sets of information instead of one. So instead of just seeing this as an opportunity to draw a silhouette of a candlestick or a vase, it's also an opportunity to embed two faces. So it's far more interesting to think about both spaces equally. When you start, trees and organic materials are actually really fantastic to look at because you can really get lost in the holes or the spaces between the branches, and they take on this very flat delineated kind of space. So that's a really great subject matter to look at to practice this because you can really see these very distinct shapes. But once again, remember, it may look like they drew the tree, but they didn't. They looked at the holes between the branches. Often, complex objects like a tree are easier to map the spaces than the tree themselves. The tree is actually extraordinarily complex, but the holes between the tree are pretty simple. And oftentimes, by moving the emphasis of your focus from the primary figure in the foreground, like the tree, and looking at those spaces that are flat and usually very simple, it's easier to draw. So this is a good example of sort of the final output of your drawing. You're going to want to occupy an entire page, edge to edge. This is a very good composition too. I like that they cropped in close so that it really feels like every black shape has a very clear edge and contour. You can see like this is a closed black shape next to another closed black shape next to another closed black shape. What that will do is leave all of the whites as a single path. And remember, the whites are the leftover places after you've drawn and mapped out the holes. And I know that this seems like you can just draw the figure and then fill in the holes, but we can see the difference. We can tell when what you're looking at by how you draw your shapes. So really change the way you look, because this is not just a product but an exercise. Whenever you see that you can look at objects and subject matters with a variety of filters and ways of seeing, there's all of these problem-solving solutions that become available to you. So this is like a really great example of somebody using this project and this exercise for a fantastic output. So in this way, like, the artist is really interested in the hair, and everything else was left as empty space. So they are drawing all of the holes. I know it looks like they drew the hair, but they didn't. They drew the holes. So they drew every one of these little holes, and what was left over was the hair shape. And then instead of filling in the holes like we're going to do in our project, they fill in the figure. And what it did is created this really amazing illusion where the eye and the viewer's mind has to make up some of the lost information, and we love that. It's called closure in Gestalt principles. The mind will fill in the missing information, and the viewer feels like they're part of your drawing. They feel active instead of passive. And that's one of the great reasons that you might use positive and negative in the future.